Everybody is so worried about AI taking our jobs. Let me tell you why AI will be the biggest explosion for new jobs and my opinion on why that's the case. So, a little bit of theory here first before we dive in, and then I'm going to use Claude to tell you why. I think that there are so many people in the world that would be ultra creative, but for the fact that they don't have a software engineering degree, but they don't know how to code, but they don't know how these systems work. They know, they have an idea, they understand their profession, they understand what would it take to build software for their profession, but they just can't do it. And it doesn't make sense for them to hire folks, but if they can build it in a weekend and it's viable, which is, as these models get better, it has to be viable, that suddenly there is a whole nother level of businesses and creatives that are unlocked. But let me tell you why this isn't just good for them. It's actually good for the economy. Let's dive in. What I want you to do is create a S-shaped curve, and I want there to be a line where the S-shaped curve doesn't cross, and have that just like below the top part of the y-axis, and the S-shaped curve should be steep in the front, and then it should tail off along and below this line. The x-axis should be labeled time, and the y-axis should be labeled like percent of goal. And the S curve should be basically labeled using AI to create. And so go ahead and create this chart for me and title it "The AI Revolution Will Not Be Stopped." Create this for me. So basically, and you'll see what I mean in a second here when Claude does the work for me, I think that the general problem with these models is that they don't have your contextual awareness. They don't have a lifetime of lived experience with the problem that you're trying to solve. Well, that means that as they build, and as they build for people like me that don't know the Python libraries to use or the different coding interfaces, which means that we also don't know the areas of the gap between my knowledge and what the model is creating. And so, let's change this a little bit. Make the S-shaped curve much shorter, and don't put the time in years. Put it in hours, and the asymptote should always level off below the 85%, and that line should be labeled MVP. So go ahead and redo this and move the using AI to create to the center of the S curve. This is actually, weirdly, this is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. You see how it was like I got to 75% really quick, and I have to keep modifying. And that difference between that sort of MVP or even maximum viable product and the AI vibe coding line is where jobs will exist. It'll be people to be checking stuff, to be validating that, to be taking the context, right? It's like to be feeding that back into the model. So you can exactly see what I'm talking about here. Weirdly, this is perfectly illustrated my point, is that it got very, very close, very, very fast. But I have to keep talking with the model now. And the problem is that as you talk with the model, sometimes this is unsolvable, which is the way in which it's trying to solve this problem. It's just not the best way to do it. And so in this case, I have to just say, keep modifying down. But what we really need is this gap, which if I could show, if Claude did a good job, this gap here is where a ton of jobs will exist. And the gap between 80 and 100% is where a lot of jobs will exist, because people like me or other really creative folks can actually launch something. They can, without the help of an engineer, they can get what's on their brain to the page. And there's going to be a bunch of low-skilled jobs here in this gap, right, where people can go and modify things, check things, right? And then this gap, there's going to be high skilled labor that is really going to say, how do I take it to the next level? And the next level might be understanding some unique insight from the customer. Now, this still will exist as new features are created, but the gap between 80 to 100%, because more people will be able to get to the MVP, which means the pie will grow bigger. There will be more people that are building on their own, that are creating things on their own. It won't be limited to San Francisco. Anyone, anywhere in the country will be able to do this. And right now, ironically, this is the thing that's preventing us from getting there, right? Is both, it's this adoption curve. But as the models improve, this thing will become steeper, and suddenly this asymptote will get shorter and shorter, right? And it might even cross this MVP line as we sort of go over time. But I think that the economy will be reoriented around this gap, and this gap between 80 and 100 is where a bunch more jobs will be created, because there was a great talk from a billionaire one time, and he's like, I can only buy so many cars. And so if we're really talking about wealth distribution, it's going to come from the bottom up, and it's going to allow more people to create, to build, to then have to get revenue in the door, to use that revenue to hire people to help close more revenue. And then as the business matures, they're going to need people to, and maybe those are even AI people that are working on certain features. But I don't think that agents will replace everything, because as I have found, these models are people pleasers. And even if they become agent pleasers, that means that no net new knowledge can exist in the system without synthesis. And so I don't really believe, I spent so much time talking to these models, I don't really believe that this synthesis will happen in AI anytime soon. And this is where the creators who are going to be running these S curves, that's where they're going to exist. There are going to be humans to close this gap as that asymptote lines off, and that'll get closer and closer, and this curve will get sharper and sharper. And then there are always going to be tasks here that the AI models just won't do, right? You need to smell something. Good luck, AI. For some reason, we haven't invented any AI that can smell. We've got videos, audio, anyways. So I think this is kind of how the world would be reoriented, and the models are getting there. They're very, very, very close. And of course, a lot of, there are some bleeding edge people that are already creating and shipping stuff. But yeah, this is my optimistic take for the future. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think.